Hi, so this week we are going to add value to our 1-point perspective drawings. So the first thing I would suggest doing is this exercise of creating value scales. So I create 10 boxes on a sheet of paper um, and measure them out so that they're all the same size, 10 squares. And the idea here is that I'm going to create a range of 10 different shades of gray from black to white or white to black. And I want to make sure that I kind of give this equal um, difference between each square so that it is able to have a gradient and gradually get from one side to the other, the relative degree of darkness to lightness. So the first example I show there is with graphite. And the way that I am able to achieve this is by using different hardnesses of pencils. So my hardest pencil was a 2B and my softest pencil was a 6B. And the 6B pencil is much darker than the 2B pencil. So the softer it is, the darker it gets. And then it's also pressure and amount of uh, coverage. So the more coverage, the darker it'll be. The more pressure I put down, the darker it will be. Here I'm working in charcoal, and very much the same. I've got 3 different charcoal pencils: hard, medium, and soft. So the soft is the darkest, um, the medium is the middle, and then the hard is the lightest. But it's also, again, varying degrees of coverage, pressure, um, and so forth. This third one I'm using ink. So I have 5 different gray markers, a 10 degree, a 30 degree, a 50 degree, a 70 degree, and a 90 degree. So I kind of laid those out. And then in between those, I'm kind of going over them multiple times to kind of build that coverage. The next one, I'm going to use a pen, and I'm going to do some cross hatching. And here it's the number of lines, how close the lines are together. But I'm doing vertical and horizontal lines, and so it's a combination of that, and also the thickness of the pen that I'm using. It helps determine the darkness as well. So I've got a couple things: coverage, how close together those lines are, the line weight, how thick that line is, um, and then how many times I go over it. So here I've even begun doing diagonal lines to have a third direction, and now I'll do diagonal lines in both directions, and I'll do a vertical and horizontal lines. So even more coverage to get to that black. But the key here is really to push your darks. So often I find students will only reach like a 50% or 70% gray when you really need to be able to show that your black is black and your white is white, but your grays have a lot of variation in between. This last example, I'm using my gray colored pencils, and again, I only have about 5 different gray colored pencils to choose from. So it's a little bit of coverage, a little bit of blending in between shades of gray, um, and as well as pressure. But with all of them, I tend to have about similar pressure with the colored pencil. It's more about the tones I'm using, the values I'm using of the colored pencil. So then the next exercise is I would go back and shade your cubes. Now this value scale and shading the cubes is not homework that's required. You don't need to turn it in. But this is good practice for you so that when you are shading your rooms, your 1-point perspective architectural drawings, that you have some practice. You're not going into it completely as a novice. You've got a little bit of experience playing around with understanding your light source. So here I've played around with a number of different light sources coming from above. Pretty much all light sources you're going to have will come from above, either the sun or lights above you or to the sides. So here as you can see, I'm darkening in with the cylinders. You need kind of a gradient to show that there's a curve. With cubes, with boxes, with more squared off shapes, you're going to need to show a dark side, a light side, a medium side, usually. So it all depends on where your light sources are coming from, and that's how you're going to be able to show volume and depth when you're adding value to pretty much any object. So as you can see here, I've been working in a variety of different media. I started with some ink, doing a little charcoal and graphite, and but again, it's all about coverage, pressure, so forth. So I'm going to bring that into doing some interior drawings in value. So this gallery I went to in Berlin had all of these pedestals with different objects on them and microphones, kind of collecting their ambient sounds. It was an interesting multimedia installation. But essentially, all of those podiums, pedestals rather, are cubes or boxes. So I'm going to start out as though I'm drawing 20 cubes, but here they are in this kind of arrangement. And I also, drew the room, so I had the back wall and the ceiling, the floor, and all of that coming back from the vanishing point. And as you'll notice, so the light source is actually coming from above. There's a skylight in this room, and the insides of the cubes are lightest, and the direction facing us is kind of dark, and I want to show the value of the floor and so forth. I'm going to actually shade in, show value of drawings I showed you last week, the contour drawings in my apartment as well. And as you can see here, I start kind of from the back and work towards the front. I'm not too worried about detail right off the bat, just kind of laying in value range. And I'll go back in as I start to compare to the photo, but compare to objects after I fill them in. I can build that value. I can also take it away with eraser, but if you feel it's too light, you come back and you can add more and darken it. And it's good to understand that most of whatever you're drawing is not going to be white, so it needs some kind of coverage, even if it's just a light gray. But pushing it, building that dark is going to give you more contrast, and it's going to show more depth. When you leave it very light, it stays very flat, and so giving it that contrast that it deserves is what's going to give that pop to your drawings that you need to develop, so that you have dynamic, intriguing, and higher contrast drawings. And it's really what's going to give your work that richness that it needs. So as you can see, I go in. I also draw my lines kind of in the directions, either vertical, horizontal, or leading back to the vanishing point, those converging lines. And rather than just kind of random directions, try to maintain some consistency, because it gives this perceived energy, this perceived direction of the table, the perceived direction of objects, and so forth. So there's the final of that piece. You can see how rich it is when I put that dark into the couches, really push that dark. So I start with just laying in some light grays This one is in marker, so I'm going to start with my lightest grays and build up because I can't really erase my markers. So I want to start light and work towards the dark. Um, and as you can see, just kind of building up that value range. Um, and I start lighter than I need to, but that allows me to come in and put the darks in, build the shadows. Shadows tend to be underneath objects, um, and then here I am kind of adding a little detail to the paintings, but not much, just to kind of show a little bit of value range to them, and so that they are kind of consistent with the rest of the drawing. But I'm not going in trying to perfect detail. I'm really just trying to see right now that I want you to be able to show me that you're understanding where things are light, dark, and everything, all the grays in between. But you can notice that my lines have been drawn both vertical, horizontal, or converging back to that vanishing point. So it's really got that movement. So then moving on, looking, I'm going to have you do a sketchbook drawing of exterior, a one-point perspective. So this is a movie set in London, happened upon one day, and it's very much just the same as drawing a hallway, but you're looking at the outsides of buildings being walls rather than the insides of the hallway being walls, and so some things that are consistent. All the windows are the same height. Um, but I'm also, I'm checking back and forth across the street one another to make sure that my distances are the same and my proportions are the same. And for this one, I'm just going to do contour lines. I'm not going to shade this one in. So your exterior one-point perspective drawing for the A3 sketchbook this week only needs to be contour lines. It does not need to consist of any value shading at all. But there you have it. Just a quick, nice sketch of line drawings, but trying to make sure that all my proportions, windows, and all my angles are correct. I'm going to do another contour line drawing of this diner in Minneapolis, and but also half the drawing is the sidewalk and the street, so all leading back to a vanishing point, somewhere about where the flag is where my eye level and viewpoint is leading everything. So go in and I'm going to draw this in pencil first, and then I'll come back and decide on final lines with ink. But here I'm just citing this without measuring. I'm trying to be able to kind of gauge everything without actually measuring each object. So that's a skill that you'll want to be able to develop, because when you're drawing from observation, you don't necessarily have you don't have the luxury of having a photograph to lay a ruler on top of and measure. So going in, and now I've decided what lines I like the best. I'm going to kind of add those in with ink, and remember, when you're doing one-point perspective, either lines are vertical or they're horizontal, or as you can see with the sharp edges, they all converge back to the vanishing point. So adding some signage, but you don't have to. It's just kind of it's extra. That's not really what the lesson is. What I do want to notice is if you see how the light posts, they get smaller and smaller, and they get closer to one another. The lines in the sidewalk get closer together as they get farther away. and just a simple line drawing. This one, for the exterior drawing this week, again, no value needed to be added. Only for your A2 interior drawing and your A3 interior drawing do you need to add value. So the last one I'm going to show you of an exterior drawing is a canal in Amsterdam. And this one's a little bit trickier because not all the lines lead back to the vanishing point, but for the most part, um, uh, they're generally leading back to that single point. And, um, and so this one I'm actually going to add value to, but I don't start adding value until I've got all of my lines correct and exactly in place where I want them. And so, but this one's a little trickier because um, some curves and archways and so forth. Um, what can I say? Again, the big thing to notice is all the railing along the edge of the canal. All of those posts slightly get smaller and they get closer together further and further as you go back. So you need to make sure that that's something that's very consistent throughout your drawing. But I added value to this one because I just wanted to show you another drawing adding value. But like for your exterior drawing, don't need to add value this week. I'm going to be doing value next week for exterior drawings. And so this one I'm doing all of my value with graphite and really just pushing that black as hard as I can. With graphite, you really don't even get to a real black. You get to like a 70% gray. So, if you're using graphite, you really have to kind of push it, more pressure, more coverage to get that really dark value. All right, and now I'm going to show you some examples of past students' work. So this is the library at AUK. And you notice just all the value range is met there. And being able to go in and add shading is really what's going to give this depth and make things look a lot more realistic. So prior to COVID, we always did these drawings in the hallway at school, but now you have more freedom to work from home, and you can take photographs anywhere that you go in public. If you are going out in public, if you go to the mall, if you go out anywhere. You can make sure you bring your phone and you find a space that's interesting. Just photograph it. Stand directly facing it, and like any kind of hallway is a great space. So for this week, you're going to need to also start taking some photos of exterior spaces, and I would kind of consider most of the malls to be exterior spaces because they're really just kind of covered with a skylight. So you could do that too, or any kind of hallway, alleyway. Start photographing as well. For your 1-point perspective interior drawings, the one in the sketchbook and the A2 drawing pad, I do want you to add value like these. So last week the examples I showed you were all kind of just contour, plain line drawings, and now you can go in. That last example was done on gray paper. You can even attempt to do this on gray paper and using charcoal and the white pastel to get your value range is definitely an option for you as well. But make sure you get your contour lines down first and then go in and fill in the value with shading. And also, if you do get too dark, you can pull it back out with the eraser. The kneaded eraser is really good for pulling charcoal out. You know, the rubber eraser is really good for kind of getting your harder lines and detail. Um, but you know, this is essentially what I'm looking for this week. This example was done in ink, so you can also work in ink. It's not required, and I believe this one was done in ink as well. Um, and then show you just a couple examples of students' work that was done of exterior architecture as well. And so these are in value, but just kind of showing you that 1 point perspective architecture. All right, so if you have any questions, just email me this week. Good luck.